What's going on, guys? Welcome back to NetworkChuck. I know, I'm like 15 minutes late. It might be the latest one I've ever had. It's Jason Gooley's fault, and I'm about to blame him. I'm about to bring him on. But real quick, welcome to Monday. How you guys doing today? I've got Jason Gooley. He's amazing, author of like 1,000,000 books. And you know what? Enough talking. Let's bring him on right now. Jason, say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
So it's your fault. I'm just going to blame you for it. You Cisco guys love your
Oh,
WebEx or something, and I tend to
yeah.
use a Skype. Whatever, man.
We try to get it working, but it took a while. But here we are.
So real quick, guys, in the chat, my Discord people, let me know if everything sounds okay. And real quick, Jason Gooley, if you don't know who he is, he's the godfather of network programmability. It became kind of a funny name that stuck with him because he is the guy now. Author of like 1,000,000 books this year alone. I lost count. What are the books you wrote this year?
Oh my gosh. So I have them behind me because in case I forget. No, but I started off. We did the EN Core book towards the end of. I think it came out December 26th. So in a calendar year, of course, or your fiscal year. Then we did the Cisco Sd-Wan book. I did the Cisco SDA book, as well as the Cisco DevNet Associate book. And then, if that's not enough, I may be on the hook for some videos soon. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know.
Why
We'll
didn't you
see.
let anybody else write some books? That's just a jerk
I
move,
was thinking
Jason.
about that, but I was trying to beat Brad. I mean, it's the only way to defeat Brad is to,
That's
there
true.
can be only one. And, unfortunately, I think he might beat me still. I
Oh
think he's
my
at
goodness.
7 books. And I'm
I
only
mean,
6
Cisco
now.
certainly put the work in for you. I mean, going from just a few certification tracks to like 1,000,000,000 with different little forks and avenues in each one, it's insane. So
Yeah.
I see the workload there. So the works you're probably more well known for right now are going to be the DevNet Associate, the Encore, and SD-WAN. Those are the hot buzzworthy things right now. I wanted to
Sure.
get you on to talk about DevNet, SD-WAN, and if we have time, maybe some Encore. But I saw some people already in the chat asking about DevNet. That's been the hot thing this year, obviously. The whole DevNet 500. Right now, people are rushing to get their DevNet Associate to get the DevNet class of 2020. So real quick, dude, what is DevNet? What is that thing?
DevNet, if I had to sum it up in one word, future. DevNet, the future. And what do I mean by that? Like we all hear a lot of stuff about DevNet, and I think that when we have these conversations, a lot of times folks are kind of wondering like, what is this mysterious DevNet? What does it even mean to me, and why should I even care? And so, in my opinion, DevNet is the single one place you can go to learn a whole bunch of different technologies in a programmatic way. Now, that is a very buzzword loaded statement that I just said. But
It's
what I
not, it
mean
sounds
by
like you're
that
writing
is,
a Cisco book or something.
I know. Ooh, what should we call it? How to DevNet. We'll co-author that. We'll call it How to DevNet, and then we'll make some music videos to go along with it, dude. Like How to
Sounds
DevNet, silent auction, put a silent dance. Anyway, so in my opinion, DevNet is kind of the place that you go where you want to learn some of this new technology and you're not sure exactly how or where to start. And what's cool about that is you've heard a lot about programmability and automation. Everybody's out there talking about it. It's not just Cisco. And what's important about it is that it is one of those things that really, if you're a network engineer or a network operator or somebody looking to break into that field, it is the type of technology or a type of method of technology they can use to make your life easier. Really, in the grand scheme of things, is to automate some of the mundane, make things move a lot faster, and hopefully with less error, and make your business a little bit more stable by using some of these techniques.
Now, I have to say, the more I got into automation, I realized that it's been a thing for a long time. Like, none of this stuff is like brand new. What is
Right.
new is that we're talking about it a lot now. Why now?
You know what I think? I think it's just gotten to the point where we finally realize Cisco's done a good job at this as well, is just really taking a step back and looking what's going on the horizon. And we just can't keep up from a manual intervention perspective and configuring things manually with as many devices that are out on the networks today. It is so hard for oftentimes companies that have 1 to 2, maybe 3 folks running their global network to be managing and maintaining and configuring all these different devices one at a time. It's just, I think gone. I don't want to say gone are the days because there will always be reasons and needs, a need to do things manually. But I also think that gone are the days of just, going through the status quo of, all right, well, I got to spin up another 500 locations. Let me just dive into my Excel spreadsheet for IP addresses and my crossover cable and my console cable and start cracking away on 9,000 devices. I did that. I went bald. See, um,
That's why DevNet happened. It was your yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
literally it was like Boston DevNet. All right, well, one will get me paid and one will cost me a lot of money. So I decided to go with the DevNet way.
That is golden. I love that. That was good. So for a lot of my audience, they come from different realms. Some are just trying to get into IT. Some are starting their network engineering journey. Some are just getting into hacking and stuff. So just so you guys know, we're talking about network engineering. We're talking about configuring routers and switches and firewalls and all this amazing stuff. But now with the DevNet and the way things are moving, network engineers are having to learn a bit of development, a bit of programming, and to do what Jason's kind of mentioning, automating what we can't do by ourselves. It's getting like the networks are getting bigger; they're not getting smaller, and they're becoming more complex. So real quick, Jason, I want to ask, because I know this can be one of the most popular questions I have here, is someone who's going for their CCNA right now, starting the network engineering path. How should they look at and approach this new phase of development and everything? Should they jump into DevNet right after? Should they start playing with it right now? What would you say?
So that's actually an interesting question. That does come up quite a bit. And one of the things I think I love about that question is we know the typical answer from a design perspective is it depends, but it also applies to this. And the reason being is that when you're going for a certification, I think what I really appreciate about the new certifications and how we redid everything in February was that even if you're just going for a CCNA and you're just starting out, by default, going for your CCNA, you will have to learn a percentage of programmability and automation.
That's true.
So you don't necessarily have to say, I'm going to go right down the DevNet path right away. But by studying for the CCNA, there's a 20% of that exam is essentially programmability and automation now. So at some point, you're going to run into it. So far, the best place is DevNet to start your journey, right? You want to go to DevNet, you want to get started, you want to look at some of these things, you want to practice these different technologies, find out what's on the blueprint, all of that, lab things without worrying about breaking anything. That's where you would start. And it would apply. So the question is kind of reversed there, where you can start with DevNet and it'll apply to CCNA, or you start with CCNA and you will find yourself looking into DevNet because you need it for the exam. So I think it's 6 to 1 and half a dozen to the other, but at the same time, it's important to understand why those overlaps exist. And I think that's one of the biggest keys of topics of discussion is that we talk about automation being so important in this day and age. It's part of even the most fundamental certification for Cisco now because it's that important. And then same thing.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Flip side for network engineering is, right? So you need to learn network engineering to get your DevNet associate. And you will learn that in the process as well.
Okay, cool. So now you mentioned the DevNet Sandbox, which a lot of people don't know about, and they don't know how awesome that thing is because it's not just a place where you can learn development. You can also just mess with Cisco stuff if you don't have access to it. So
exactly.
First of all, I want to know why didn't they secure the devnet.com URL? And second, why is it developer.cisco.com?
So there's a couple things to that. So devnet.cisco.com used to be the main URL for DevNet, and then we renamed it developer.cisco.com because it's more for, I think the thought process there, and just to make sure I'm not over speaking, but I'm pretty sure the thought process.
I'm gonna get you in trouble. Watch.
Yeah, let me squirm here real quick. But I think the thought process behind that was that it's more than just network development, right? So yes, there is a developer network. It's a network of humans learning development and on DevNet, but it's also more than just programmability directly to a network device because the concepts and things that you learn through DevNet, how to integrate, different software using APIs, how to even interact with an API, that can apply to a whole bunch of other things that aren't necessarily just network engineering devices. It could be whatever you want it to be, anything you want to monitor. It could be garage door openers, could be thermostats, and it could also be obviously the things that run the backbone of the internet.
Right, okay, I see the vision there. Now, real quick, I realize I didn't plug any of your stuff just yet. So, Jason Gooley, obviously the goat of developer stuff like this. He wrote 3 big books this year, and I didn't know you wrote the SDA book as well. So Sd-Wan, DevNet, Encore, SDA. Anything else? Am I missing any?
That's this year. Yeah.
That's this year. Just this year. Oh, and that's it, Jay? Come on, dude. You told me you're gonna get on it this year.
I'm slacking, man. I'm slacking. I gotta get with it, man.
So I've got 3 of those books in the description if you want to check them out. I will have to add the 4th because now I didn't realize you did all that. And how many CCIEs do you have now?
I stopped at 2. I decided there was a work-life balance thing, and I'm not as cool as half the folks out there now.
Which ones do you have?
I have routing and switching and service provider, and at some point, once it flips over, it'll be enterprise infrastructure and then service provider.
So are you going to get a chance, or do you dare to go and take the new lab for the new stuff?
I think it'd be fun. I just haven't. There's really no opportunity for me to do that unless I just pay for a lab out of pocket. As much as I love I love wanting to do that. At some point when I recertify, it's just going to rename anyway. So, but I was involved with creating a lot of that lab, so I can tell you that there's a strategic reason we decided to write the type of books that we wrote when we wrote them. And I think that a lot of that is just the fact that if Cisco makes a line in the sand that says, hey, software-defined access, software-defined WAN, programmability, automation, Ansible, things like that are going to be on these exams. To me, before February 24th came around and we actually dropped those new certifications, it was kind of like, hey, these are going to be necessary very, very, very soon. And
okay, I see.
I went into it with this whole grand scheme, this grand plan, and the plan was like, yeah, man, I'm going to write these books, and we're going to stretch them out over like a year and a half, and I'm going to have like 2 months off in between each book, and it was going to be great. And what ended up happening was, it was almost time to be February, and they wanted all the books done as fast as humanly possible. So it took a little longer than anticipated, but we pulled in every single project, and we got some really stellar authors on these things, and we managed to get them all done. I think all of them, for the most part, it's kind of interesting. SDA, SD-WAN, and DevNet Associate, all for the most part, launched right around August, September.
I saw them all just come out at once. I know people are getting antsy about the DevNet book, which I heard is great. I already had my DevNet before it came out. I beat you to it, so whatever, dude. Thanks for the help.
I don't even have it yet, dude. It's kind of a funny story, right? Because
that's hilarious.
I think we were all in the anticipating that for helping create these things that was kind of gonna be one of those things, but it looks like I need to buckle down and actually take this thinking thing. So I will probably be doing that over my Christmas break, maybe. We'll see.
Excellent. So I know a ton of people I see on my Twitter feed are trying to get their DevNet before the end of year because they want that DevNet class of 2020. Real quick in the chat, guys, if you're going for your DevNet associate, let us know. And Jason, any like tips as they're approaching their end of their exam? Now, I'm asking you for tips for an exam you haven't taken yet, but I assume you know a little bit about it just because you wrote the book on it. Any tips on what to do for this exam, how to prepare?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I hear from a lot of candidates is that be open to being out of your comfort zone. And what do I mean by that? This is a programmability exam about network technologies. However, comma, it's a big comma, you might not necessarily spend a lot of time on data center, or you might not spend a lot of time on security appliances, or routing, depending on where you're coming from, or collaboration, if things of those nature, things along those lines, right? So I would say is read through the blueprint, truly understand what's going to be on that exam, and then practice some of the things that you're probably not normally comfortable with practicing.
Gotcha. We got to read around that, but I think I understand what you're saying there.
As vague as that was, the blueprint is expansive more so than just routing and switching technologies.
Now, I want to say this. I know that you're a Cisco guy, so if I ask you what your favorite automation tool is, it's going to be DNA Center. So why even waste my time? But I'm going to ask you anyway.
Cisco did.
But so let's assume that Cisco DNA Center is out of the realm of someone wanting to practice it, or it's a company that can't afford it, whatever. What's your favorite automation tool? Because I know there's Ansible in there, there's Puppet, there's Chef. What would you say is your favorite automation tool right now?
That's a great question. I really do like Ansible, and I do a little bit of Salt and Chef, but for some reason to me, Ansible just seems like second nature almost, because
Mm-hmm.
it is we're 30 years into knowing what syntax and command line looks like from a CLI Cisco perspective. So when you get into Ansible, you're like, I could see what it's going to do. I mean, you
That's
can
what I
just
love
look
about
at it.
Ansible. Yeah, like
It's
you,
just so
you could not
easy to
know
read.
YAML, you could not know anything about Ansible, but you can go, oh yeah, I know what that's doing. That's what's
Right,
pretty
you
cool
could,
about it.
right. And now you might not, and I think that's also you really bring up a good point. I think that's also important for the exam and some of the practice of the exam and these technologies is that you might not be a Python wizard. I mean, I don't even consider myself a Python wizard. Man, I can do some Python, but you don't have to be like Michelangelo and drawing the Sistine Chapel with Python. You just need to really understand what it's doing. And if there's something that's not right, understand kind of what you need to do to fix it and why. And the same thing applies for Ansible as well. Like you might not know what YAML means or why it's structured in that way, but if you can look at it and say, okay, they're adding a VLAN with this IP address, they're doing a no shut, the rest of that stuff you can learn because really what a YAML file is doesn't change.
Right.
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 The hardest part of all of that, believe it or not, a lot of folks think it's the programmability, it's the automation tools. It's really what you want to do with those on the Cisco technology you're trying to work on, or whatever technology, because that syntax is what's unique to that platform, that device, that family of routers or switches or access points or whatever it may be. So it's kind of an interesting thing because really if you learn and understand what you're going to try to do with the device, the program languages and the things like that will fall into place.
I totally agree with that. And I know this, I'm going to ask you two questions real quick. So I know a lot of people are like, man, I see all these changes in the network engineering field. Does that mean I have to become a developer? Is that what I have to do now? And you kind of already answered it, but what would you say to someone who's scared? Maybe I know so many people, right, who start the career and maybe they started with programming and they loathed it, they hated it, so they switched to network engineering and they found their happy place.
Sure.
And now the script is being flipped again. So what would you tell someone like that?
One of the things I would say is that I was afraid of it myself even until I started. And let me show you something real quick. Bear with me. Brief moment.
All right, he's gone.
I'm gone.
Hi, guys.
I'll show you something important to me. Bear with me.
I'm going to sip some coffee while he's gone.
Here's how I overcame my fear. Now, don't laugh at me, everyone, because I know I'm going to age myself here, but basic. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story, but I will bring it back to the answer to that question. I first got this book at my best friend's house. This is copyrighted 1994. He bought it new. So yeah, probably 1994 when I actually got this book, okay? And the funny thing is he was like, you got to learn programming. You got to learn I'm going to show you DOS. I'm going to show you Windows 3.1. I'm going to show you all these things. And then he's like, I'm going to show you QBasic. The extent
I'm
of my
going to wager that
programmability-
95% of the people watching right now have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But the funny thing is with QBasic, it's a programming language, which a lot of the same type of technologies that you use, techniques, if, then, else, go to, all that, it's all in there. It's same C, it's Java, it's all the same stuff. What I mean by that is that he gave me this book, says, I want you to learn programming. And I had next to no interest in it, right? Then I started practicing and I programmed a circle, and it was just with this big circle would show up. And then I figured out if, then, go to. Then it was big circle, big circle, big circle. I was so excited. I created a circle that would go back and forth, and it was so cool. And then I found out that you can invoke the PC speaker as a siren.
Ooh.
So it just went, woot, woot, woot. And eventually, woot, woot. And it was the most exciting thing I created with QBasic. Now, though, by doing that, just getting started with something as silly as that sounds, you learn it. And it takes the edge off of it, and it takes the fear away from it. I have behind me, sitting over here, you probably can't see it, a couple Raspberry Pis. They're just the Model 3s.
I know nothing about those, yeah.
you are the Raspberry Pi wizard. We're going to have to get a sink in on this. But again, I get these Raspberry Pis. They've been literally sitting here for 2 years. I have not done anything.
Those poor Pis.
It's a waste. It's such a waste. They have memory, PoE, all this, injectors. It's great. They just sat there because I just haven't had a time to do anything with it. But I'm going to start doing things with programmability on those with my daughter so I can start showing her. She's 5, she'll be 6 in a week from today.
Oh,
On the
perfect. Yes. Oh,
and
congrats.
dude, thank you so much. And she's the love of my life, and I'm going to try to see if I can help inspire her to do things that she wants to do using programmability. So the long-winded answer to that question is, instead of being afraid of it, just start. And just start at, and it's just start on stuff that's not necessarily just technology related. So if you want to start on learning programmability or Python, you can do all kinds of different things without even touching anything from a networking perspective. Or if you're familiar with networking and maybe you want to use the knowledge that you know of networking, understand and learn programmability, developer.cisco.com.
Yeah, and I can tell you, like, that is the best way to learn. Like, I did a few projects where I was just using Alexa to, like, add OSPF to my router and then remove it. Like, just fun things like that using APIs. It's so fun to do that. It really is.
It would be so cool, isn't it? See, I don't have Alexa, but I should get it just so I could say, all right, Alexa, bounce BGP when somebody else is on call.
Yes, which is not really that hard to do. I'm telling you, it's
really,
crazy.
It's crazy. Your IP BGP star soft in. Wait, or star soft. Not even just star. Like, oh no. Oh man.
Yeah, that would be devastating.
Gonna do it the hard way.
Oh goodness gracious. Now, as someone who starts DevNet, let's say they get the DevNet Associate, which, it is a great foundational certification, but it only goes so far. Sure. Once they want to go further down the path, and let's say they're a diehard routing and switching guy, they have their CCNA routing and switching, they jump into DevNet, whatever, maybe they have their CCNP routing and switching. What would you say is the next step to become more involved with the developer networking stuff?
Yeah, for that, especially with that kind of a background, I would say look into doing obviously the technology core for the DevNet professional, and then pick on one of the different core technologies or exams that you would like to focus on to get your CCNP or at that point your DevNet professional. Because you're starting off by learning a bunch of different technologies. You already know routing and switching to a degree. You already have got your experience with all of that. And you've already gotten the basis of programmability from the DevNet Associate. The next step is to refine those skills on specific technologies that you could possibly get experience with. One thing I will also bring up is you mentioned something that is a conversation that comes up quite a bit, is that how do folks get access to DNA Center, Cisco DNA Center? It's really, it's not the cheapest thing.
No.
But using the Devnet Sandbox, like you mentioned, using the dCloud Instant Labs that we have available, you can go online, spin yourself up an instance. You can even programmatically hit some of these things with APIs without having to worry about breaking anything, and it doesn't cost anything.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, like,
it's
DevNet
amazing.
Sandbox is still amazing to me. I can't believe you guys offered that because it's a Cisco router, a CSR 1000V, just out there open. Anyone can access it. You want to do an API call? Do it. It's so cool.
Yeah, just hit it. And that's the thing is, and I would say that if you're starting off and you want to learn that, the advice I would have is literally, you can sit down on the DevNet website, pick one lab, and it might take you 30 minutes. Just carve yourself out an hour, sit down, go through that lab, and do a couple of the API calls. Once you do that, all the mystery is gone. Right?
Mm-hmm.
What does it do? How does it work? And there's no fear because what are you out, an hour of your time? You don't even have to tell anybody you're doing it. Nobody's going to even know. It could be a secret. But if you do it, if you do that, you will realize, you'll come away from that realizing that is not as complicated as I thought it was. And when you start doing that, everybody who's watching this, I can guarantee you, probably has spent quite a bit of time surfing the internet in their lifetime. They probably have.
A little bit, yeah.
They've probably gone to a couple websites. Once you start realizing that REST APIs are just HTTP calls and things of that nature, and you've already kind of been doing it for many, many years, and you just got to learn some of the structure, it really demystifies a lot of that. And then it's just going to be up to you. You're limited by your imagination of how do I want to take these different devices or different platforms and get them to do something that I want them to do that they don't natively do.
Yeah, it's what you're saying is so funny because if you're in IT for any amount of time but you never touch development, it's always that, like, you have that wall between you and them.
Right.
But when you look into it a little bit, when you kind of peek over, you realize, oh, I mean, I kind of already understood that. I didn't know it was called that. I didn't know you could do that with it, but I already understood most of that. That's pretty cool. That's what I found with just not becoming a developer, but getting into Cisco DevNet stuff is that people who love Cisco CLI and all that will love the automation stuff.
Yeah.
It to me is the same thing. Learning Linux, that's the same thing to me. It's the same thing the same reasons I love CLI are the same reasons I love automation. So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. And what I think is so powerful about that is that it's not a far reach. And now I should be clear on that. When we created these developer certifications, or these DevNet certifications, the idea was we're bringing two different audiences together. If you're a network engineer wanting to learn about automation and programmability, here's your path. If you're a developer and want to learn networking, we also have a path for you. I think traditionally in the past, if you were the network engineer or operator and you were in charge of all that and you learned programmability, you could kind of stand up and look over the wall and say, I can kind of get what those developers are doing. I get it. I understand that. And it seems like I could do that maybe. But the flip side was always really hard. If a developer stood up, you've had these meetings with the different areas of the business and the developers stand there talking to a network engineer. And a lot of times they don't understand what the network engineer is doing because it's not 100% same, right? It's a disparate path, so to speak.
Totally.
So you really have to learn a lot more from a technology perspective as a developer to be able to do some of the networking stuff. So we try to make it easy with these new certifications by having the overlap, the 80-20 rule, where on the CCNA there's 80% networking, right, and 20% programmability, and vice versa for the Devnet Associate, where it's 80% programmability and automation, 20% network fundamentals. So we're not leaving you out to pasture on your own there.
No, I ask this question to different types of people, and I like asking developers and network engineers. Do you think it's harder for a developer to learn more about networking or vice versa? You kind of already answered it, but I mean, when I ask a developer, they'll say, "Oh, it's so much harder for a network engineer to learn programming," and then ask a network engineer, they're going to say the opposite.
Yeah, it's weird, and we've talked to a lot of developers, but the thing is that when you ask that question, a lot of times it depends on the context of how they're or using it or if they're using it. Because if for some reason, the developer is sitting there and they have no real daily need to work on the network, it goes back to how do I get experience? How do I get exposure to that? I can't touch anything. And if you're coming from a software realm looking at hardware, think about how we used to have to do labs and everything. You had to buy the equipment at the time, or you had to have something viral or CML. You had to have something spun up, and that's an investment in time, knowledge, sometimes money, and licensing and software. Otherwise, you have to buy the hardware. You're going online and you're buying the hardware, and you're trying to have something that you can program to. That's it seems like a lot bigger of a lift than just being able to say, all right, as a network engineer, I'm going to go to developer.cisco.com and click on a couple things, and everything that I need is right in front of me from a tool set perspective. So I think the developers have it a little bit tougher than the network operators, but I think that we have a pretty good curriculum to get them to that point, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, a question from one of the audience here, from Aaron Shannon. Said, were APIs already in use on the internet in the mid-90s? I suppose we can Google that right now too, can't we?
That's a Google question, but I would almost think that there would be at some point, right? At some point there would have had to been, because even back in the day, I think what we call APIs now were software calls that were there for a long time. Now that we've put a lot more structure to it by using REST and by using some of these different capabilities and being able to duplicate that type of outcome every single time and more structure and things of that nature. But I'm going to go with saying I think there was some form of software hook. It might not have been called an API, but I can almost be positive because I remember working in the 90s. I remember working on certain equipment and certain things that had software hooks that you can get into. Now, granted, the authentication was probably horrible.
Oh, right? No, clear text. Yeah.
Probably bad, but I'm pretty confident there were software hooks, aka APIs, in the 90s.
Cool. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there were. Yeah, it didn't become like too well known until we got REST, which is the framework for APIs and the rules we go by now. Now let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about SD-WAN. That's kind of like a huge buzzword now. It's been a buzzword for a long time. For someone who knows nothing about it, what's your 30-second elevator pitch on what it is? Ready, set, go. No pressure.
Okay. It is a software mechanism or design to allow you to manage and maintain your entire WAN. And essentially, the outcome of the whole thing is to protect the application experience. And I know that sounds so cheesy. And I'm going to explain why.
You should work for Cisco.
I'm going to explain why. If you need Kool-Aid, boy, look at that. Here's Kool-Aid. Comes in a special cup. It even says Cisco on the cup. No. The funny thing about that is that I get into, you almost get into philosophical debates about what software-defined anything means. And the truth of the matter is the only reason that we have a network at all is to do something over the top of it. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's the only reason the network exists is to do something. For some for back in the day and back in my day, oh man, when we're playing Doom and Duke Nukem and we had our LAN parties with our big computers we'd walk around with, old school. Remember BNC connections? Anyway, that application was the game. That game was the only reason you're getting together to have a network, right? It could be Office 365, it could be WebEx, whatever it may be. You have an application that's important to you and your business or yourself personally, and you want that application to work to the best of its ability. And what software-defined WAN gives you is the ability to not only monitor the transit links, be able to look at cost. You can actually move applications back and forth between multiple different transports, have load balancing. There's a million different things you can do all with software, which is new in the sense, and let me explain, new in the sense that now you can do it without having to go through a bunch of crazy router tricks. And what do I mean by that, right? I mean, we all know about the access list and forcing stuff over specific transports, but then it comes back up and it's still sending stuff off the suboptimal transport or any of these different things, or using commodity internet links versus Mpls. It costs a lot of money. So folks are looking at it to reduce cost and things of that nature. And if I have a 200 meg link at home with a 10 meg uplink, that costs me $60 a month, and I'm paying, I don't know, $1,800 for a fractional DS3 that's 20 meg.
That when I first started out in IT, that was the biggest confusion. Like, I'm like, why are we paying like $1 million for this little small thing over here? And I've got I'm gaming at home. Like, what's going on here?
But this T1 is like way too expensive, man.
Yeah.
And I would try to explain. It was like, well, what's a T1? Well, a T1, you take a floppy disk, right? And and you just whip it. And when you whip it, that is about the transmission speed of a T1. There you go. But
that's fantastic.
The truth of the matter is, we got by so long with very slow and very small bandwidth links, and it was fine. But then what happened? We started doing more video. Video became the pervasive voice. So now we're video all the time instead of voice. Mm-hmm. Well, now we're doing video. That's cool. Well, now I want to manage all my devices in my house, my thermostat, my hopefully, God forbid, if you do have a connected fish tank or a cash register, that they're secured properly. But there's all these devices that you have to monitor and manage that were never there before. And, well, they all impact the WAN. So how do you make sure that it works properly, and you make sure that the rest of the environment is stable? So that's where that whole software-defined capability comes in. Gives you the ability to kind of control how the traffic flows over that application.
So someone's asking a question like, it was Red Miles here, one of my moderators here. He said, what would be a good way to start playing around with SD-WAN in a corporate environment without messing up the current flow of traffic? Because I'm assuming that they have a typical maybe branch situation, and maybe doing site-to-site VPNs. What would a good way to just kind of, because there's a bunch of vendors out there. Of course, there's only one in your mind, I'm sure. Cisco, baby.
Sure. It's just us. No, I'm just kidding. No, but the thing is, that's a great question, and there's a couple ways to go about that. So there's ways to even deploy Cisco SD-WAN where you can deploy it and you're monitoring, and you're just monitoring the applications. You're not taking any policy, you're not enacting any policy that's going to cause any rerouting of traffic. So there's monitor mode, very much like ICE has monitor mode, where Identity Services Engine, you can see what's going on. Same kind of concept. The other thing you can do, a lot of folks do, is they just spin up a couple branches. And if you're in a test lab, you just need an internet link, and then you can plug in a C-Edge, a V-Edge, or any of the type of Cisco devices that you're running Cisco SD-WAN on, and instantiate it and just test it and practice without having to worry about it impacting anything. Now there, if you have multiple locations, you can even test having multiple different branches that just talk to each other and that don't break any of the other stuff, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You're tunneling. Yeah.
Now another question here, and we kind of answered this on our last live stream. I think our last one was with Keith Barker. I think it's been a long time.
Yeah.
We were talking about. I think the title was "Is MPLS dead?" And I got this question just now. Do you think MPLS will be completely replaced by SD-WAN?
Probably not. I'm just going to be completely transparent, and the reason being is that service providers have spent a lot of money building out those core networks, and we traditionally say MPLS, but I mean, really, you can transport anything you want over that. So if anything, I will see that'll be more integration with software-defined WAN. I could see that, just like we talked about before, where you have tags, SGTs or scalable group tags or whatever it might be, might interact. I see that there's going to be both for quite a long time. I mean, if MPLS goes away, it would have to be something so massive, such a new disrupting technology, even though SD-WAN is very disruptive, it is a very disruptive technology, but you can still use it over the top of MPLS. So there's no real quick hit reason for service providers to just throw away their MPLS network, because they could still carve you an internet over MPLS, or they could still carve you some sort of transporter point-to-point, or anything you want. So they could still use that network to deliver the transport services. So, and then there are also government facilities that there are mandates in some of their network policies that they have got to have a MPLS link, secured MPLS link. Yeah, there a lot of government can't use the internet or cloud, which is weird, especially nowadays, right? You're thinking, well, we can't use cloud, but yet we have our iDevices or whatever device you might have that's constantly doing something. Everything's some form of fashion on the cloud, but when you're looking at some of these government facilities, some of the high-end banking, defense contractors, they will opt away from having some of those technologies to stick with just straight leased lines or MPLS.
That's crazy. Yeah, I can definitely see.
Not in every case, but a lot of cases.
Yeah, I've definitely seen, we've heard of government contracts being won by Azure and AWS fighting it and stuff. So the government's looking into cloud and starting to embrace it. So I can see that as cloud becomes a more pervasive thing, then yeah, MPLS doesn't really make a lot of sense when most of your infrastructure is in the cloud. SD-WAN is going to optimize that. Now, SD-WAN has kind of been a thing that people have been talking about for a long time. So most people have a passing understanding of it. I think what's new, even newer and more fresh, and people are like, I have no idea what this is SD access. And I'm glad you brought the book up, because I totally forgot about you writing that. What is SD access? Now, I just did a series on the CCNA. I went over the network architectures going from the 2-tier to 3-tier, talked about data center, talked about WAN, and I talked about just the basics of how we traditionally design things. What is SD access? Because my audience will have familiarity with a typical design, but SD access is quite different.
It's different, but I think I guess let me just say why I like it, right? And what is it in general, right? So when you have a network and you're looking at a typical type of network, traditionally, like you mentioned, there's 3-tier network architectures most of the time. You could still do 2-tier collapsed core or something like that, or even a spine leaf kind of data center thing. But with SD access, it gives you a bunch of different things. So for example, you move to a routed access network. So you're losing spanning tree. Not that anybody will miss spanning tree. And I think I've even made this joke probably with you even in the past. Like, I don't know if you asked anybody when the last time they had a minor spanning tree meltdown was, because it's usually never a minor thing. It's always categorically horrible. But it was designed to do just that. It was the whole idea was to protect the network from loops. That was the whole reason it was there. But now we have gotten to the point where we need to be able to use all our bandwidth, be able to be more efficient in what we have. What that does is it gives us to be we have routed access. You can use things like Anycast now, where you can find a gateway out, the fastest gateway out to do the routings, like hot potato. It changes the way that you go about designing and managing your network. And then ultimately, what does it really give you? It gives you host mobility. So no longer do you have to worry about being mapped or limited by an IP address. So Chuck's identity is Chuck's identity, and wherever Chuck goes, we can have policy follow that. It can give you the ability to follow from a policy perspective, the ability to follow from a routing perspective. And ultimately, if you wanted to think about it in a real good analogy that I like to use is the post office. It's just, if you think about it like a post office, your network is a post office, and you have something in there called a control plane node. The control plane node is the one that knows where all the addresses are. Where does Chuck live? I know Chuck lives at this house, this address, this is Chuck. Well, just like at home, if you just got up, got in your car, and drove away, never came back, you just moved, that's it, I'm out. And you moved somewhere, but you didn't tell the post office, where do you think your mail would be sent?
Yeah, to the original address. Yeah.
Exactly. Useless to you because you're not there anymore, right? So the whole idea is now we have this concept of a control plane node without getting super deep into the weeds using Lisp, being able to identify MAC addresses and identities and map them together. You can go wherever you want, and what will
Now
happen
Lisp is kind of like
ARP,
right? It's like ARP for SD
access.
access.
It's a database for IP to MAC bindings, and that's basically it. Where locations. It's a location identifier. But what's neat about that is if you got up and just went off and took off, you can have the device automatically tell the control plane node or the post office that you moved, and now that you're over there, it'll automatically start sending your traffic, aka mail, to wherever you ended up without having to worry about your IP address. If it changed, you can keep a static IP and it'll still work. There's a million different ways to do this now because you're not bound to an IP address based on location. It's based on your identity and where you physically are. So that changes a lot of different things.
So to bring this back home to maybe a traditional CCNA perspective, I'm looking at a switch. I got switch port access VLAN 7, and my computer's in there. I'm in that subnet, and I move to another switch, and let's say it's switch port access VLAN 8, completely different subnet. But on SD access, that wouldn't matter. It would just change automatically.
Yeah, and you have to set that up. But that's the whole benefit and power of SD access is because if you move to a different VLAN, it makes no sense to suboptimally route your traffic back down to that place you used to be. So if you think about how spanning tree used to work, you'd have to follow the active path, and then you'd have to route everything back from the forwarding plane. And you're not using this whole side of the network, or depending on how big your network is, that could be pretty costly.
Oh, yeah.
But now you just pick up and move wherever you want. How many times have you heard this one? I know you've heard this. I moved my printer and it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, too many times. Yeah, did you tell us?
I can't print. Well, that's because it has a static IP address, and you moved it to a different VLAN, and it won't work unless you reconfigure that port, right? That costs man hours, that costs time, that costs outage. So the whole idea now is you can pick that thing up and move it wherever you want. As long as it's part of a fabric, it can essentially use Lisp and the locator service and essentially find out where it is and keep routing. So you have host mobility, you have policy. Yeah, you have policy that follows identity now. Those are the real powers of SD access.
Man, okay. So versus a traditional design, so we know the 3-tier, and then I see more commonly the collapsed core, where you got your distribution layer. It's acting as your core as well, then your access layer. And then we have layer 2 there. I've seen layer 3 be introduced, but now we're talking about SD access where it's all layer 3. There's no layer 2 going, it's all layer 3 devices. All the switches are layer 3. It's all routed. What kind of network hardware are we talking about? Does it have to be specialized if you were to do SD access?
So yes, but the good news is one of the reasons why I'm going to go back and tout on the U-ADP ASIC, which, by the way, I'll have to send you one of these.
Okay.
If I haven't already. I've got, from my good buddy Peter Jones, the U-ADP ASIC. So this ASIC is the chip that is in the 3650 to 3850. There's a newer version of it for the U-ADP ASIC that is in the 9300 series, the 9200, all the new Catalyst 9K series switches. Any device that has a U-ADP ASIC can be upgraded with software to go and have those features. So you can actually do SDA on a 3650 and a 3850, 9300, whatever. Really? The whole idea there, it's really cool, and it's really fascinating because, especially for labs, everyone out there, if you're looking for devices, you can find 3650s for a relatively reasonable price. You can still do all the Wireshark stuff. You can still do all the different SDA and fabric-enabled stuff that you need to do on those switches and devices as well. But the reason I'm bringing that up is that you now have the ability to do it across a multitude of different platforms. And the reason that's important is it's really investment protection for the customers. So if we can keep innovating and keep being able to put out new versions of software that will instantiate new services or features without having to go out and run out and buy new devices every couple of years, that provides longevity, but it also provides value for the customer to be able to do whatever it is that they need to do without having to essentially keep upgrading their network every couple of years.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. Now, yeah, and I have like I don't know if I have those exact chips, but I definitely have a bucket full of ASICs that I've received from Peter. He's always handing those out like candy.
The new ones that I'm really trying to get him to give me.
Oh, yeah. We'll see if we get those.
Pop on the 9300. We don't need this. Pop. Oh, yeah, I got a new necklace now.
Oh, boy. Yeah, they'll be chasing you down.
Yeah, I'll probably get a phone call on that one.
Now, with SD access, we're all used to the terms of VLANs and all that stuff, but we're seeing that kind of be abstracted out. Do we think learning about VLANs and those concepts, are those going to kind of go away with SD access? Because you don't have to think about VLANs when you're doing SD access.
You really don't on that because everything's layer 3 routed. But for someone learning, and I think the other thing that, and this is something that's important when we talk about candidates going for exams, is that you have to understand the install base. Most folks out there already have networks that are running VLANs. They're running spanning tree. They're running 3-tier. They might be running 2-tier. So there's all this stuff that I think that there's no harm in learning that, because for quite a long time, you're going to still need to know that when you go get a job somewhere. Because more often than not, you're probably not going to walk directly into a new business that's just stone cold running software-defined access right out of the gate. And
oh yeah, that's going to be rare.
Graduate.
Yeah,
you can just be pretty rare. You're just going to graduate and be like, they don't even have VLANs. I don't got to worry about learning any of that stuff. So I would say you probably still have to learn it, because it does conceptually help understanding segmentation in your network and virtualization techniques and things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, I also think that goes back to kind of those certifications, which I think is pretty cool. Even the CCNA now has SDA, as you just mentioned, and Sd-Wan and programmability. So as those ratchet up, you're going to end up by de facto learning it anyway, because you still have to learn it for the rest of the certification. But I would also say you'd probably be good to learn those different technologies for a real life scenario, for how it works and ultimately for your career.
Yeah, I mean, I know for at least the next, I don't know, maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, all the technology we use now and we know and love will still exist somewhere. But eventually we're going to see things start to converge and change. I'm just curious when that might be. No one's going to know, but it's interesting the path we're taking now. I had a question.
Hopefully not this year, though, because there's been too much this year.
yeah. Like VLANs are gone now too. Thanks a lot, 2020.
Down like 20 years.
I got a question about SD-WAN from Miriam. He says, what about performance with SD-WAN? Is it better? Is it easier to future-proof? Which I know is kind of a loaded question, because it depends on what you're using, right?
Yeah. So let me answer it in a couple different ways. Future-proof, yes. And the reason being is you ultimately get granular control on how you want your applications and network to work. I mean, you can literally control resiliency, redundancy, failover, application performance, dropping of traffic, scavenging different things that might not be beneficial to you as a business. So for granularity and future-proofing, 100%. The other side of that would be if you have MPLS and you're an MPLS shop and you have 2 circuits and you want to be able to use it, you could still use those MPLS circuits and run software-defined WAN over the top of it. Or you can start looking at things like, if you really want to talk about future-proofing, that's when you start evaluating, all right, well, let's put maybe software-defined WAN over the top of these MPLS circuits, see how they perform. If you're getting decent performance, maybe that's when you start using it for capacity planning and things of that nature, to say either I'm going to continue down this path with MPLS, or I'm going to start to say, well, let me order that one gig commodity internet link that might cost me only $150 a month or $200 a month. And then I'm going to add a tunnel over the top of that and just incorporate it into the SD-WAN fold and just see how it works. Look at vManage, monitor it to make sure it's working the way it's supposed to be working, and see how the performance numbers look. And if you find that you're having better performance, which most of the time you probably would if it's a stable internet connectivity link, that might be the catalyst to say, no pun intended. That might be the
Yeah, actually, I got a question about that.
ISR. No, I'm just kidding. That might be the catalyst to get you to look at maybe leveraging that link and eventually getting rid of some of the MPLS, or bringing in either a hybrid approach, hybrid WAN or hybrid transport, where you're MPLS and commodity internet, or you're seeing it a lot now, a lot more progressive internet, just two different providers, make sure they don't have the same last mile, and go on until the cows come home, because you have so much bandwidth and control over it. You can kind of do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I came from a shop, and this is before Sd-Wan was a thing. We were just rocking DMVPN and kind of on the edge of when iWAN came out. Yeah, we were all about saving money, so we would never invest in MPLS. It was all about getting that internet circuit, whatever we can get, the cheapest we could find, and getting two of them, like you say. And yeah, DMVPN is what we were using. Going iWAN when we could, and I wish I had SD-WAN back then. We just didn't have it. We were doing some kind of other providers, like I know Ariaka is another one of those big providers now, and we were using them back in the day. But yeah, that's what we're seeing now more of, is you can get those cheap internet links that are pretty good, and they might go down every once in a while, but if you got two of them and you got it monitored and you got instant failover and all that kind of stuff, you don't have much to worry about.
Especially if you went double router too, or dual router. So it's funny, because you'd mentioned some of these different boxes. I remember having a box back before I worked at Cisco. It was called a junction box, and it was JUXION, I think it was.
Never
junction
heard of that.
box. And what it was this thing was lime green. It was like the brightest yellowish lime green colored little metal box, and you just plugged a PCMCIA, aging myself again, cellular card in it, and it would give you two routed Ethernet links. And from there, you can plug it in and use it as a cellular backhaul backup and route stuff to it, and it would take over the cellular network. So before we really had software-defined WAN, we were forcing stuff with some of these routing tricks to a cellular interface that would take you out over the internet. And then as we fast forwarded, here we are doing SD-WAN and stuff. I think what year was it when I first met you, when we were at Cisco Live? What year was it? 2017 or 16?
2017, I think, yeah.
Okay, so when we were hanging out that day, and the normal cast of characters that we were with that day, that was the day I originally brought up the idea to do the SDA and SD-WAN book.
Wow. Okay.
There together at Cisco Live. I was having that conversation while we were all hanging out at the thing. That's how long ago this thing was thought about, and even just thinking about that, trying to put that in perspective, is like, that's been over 3 years, like 3 years. So it's like, wow, look what's happened in 3 years. I mean, a lot has changed in 3 years. And it's so weird, because we're in it. So you're always going, go. And until you get something that makes you take a step back and really think about and understand where we are or where we were, you don't really realize that time goes that fast. So, I mean, SD-WAN 3 years ago was we just were thinking about what this Viptela thing was,
Oh, yeah. Viptela was the...
it's like, I remember competing against Viptela with iWAN. So, and now I do Cisco SD-WAN.
What's Viptela? Yeah, it's gone. It's
crazy.
No, side question. This is out of my own curiosity. Catalyst. It's eating everything. Why is everything Catalyst now?
I think there's audio. Are you breaking up, or is it me? No, you know what? Honestly, I think what it basically boiled down to was similar to WebEx. It was a brand recognition thing, and instead of continuing with Spark and WebEx, two separate things, it was like, why? If you think about it from a cost perspective, you're paying for both of these brands to go global. I mean, you're paying all this money. You're paying
branding is expensive. Yeah,
everybody. It's very expensive. So, but if it's the same technology, why can't we just make it the same technology? And I think what happened there was, routers aren't just routers anymore. I mean, that's the other thing that's huge. Switches aren't just switches. Now
Mm-hmm.
a switch, a 9K, you can run an application. You can run applications like right
Yeah,
on a switch.
like you can run
Just
Docker on a switch right now.
whatever
Like
you
that's
want.
insane.
You got
Yeah.
containers. You can have any. You don't even need. Sometimes you don't even need a router. You could just put your switch and that's it, because it's a layer 3 routed device that has containers. It has. I mean, it's crazy. So back in the day when we were getting into this, I mean, the closest we had, there was something called a swouter. It was a switch router. Remember, swouter. And it was a router that had a switch in it. And then you fast forward through the 3700 series, the 3800 series, the 4Ks, being able to have switch modules put into its integrated services router was called that specifically because you're integrating everything together. And now the fact that Catalyst can do everything directly right on a switch, it was just kind of one of those things where I think they decided that everything should be under the Catalyst umbrella or portfolio name, just to duplicate reduce duplication and hopefully make a clearer path of simplicity of, look, it doesn't matter what one of these you get, you can do whatever you want to do, we just basically have to size it for you to make it appropriate. And I think that simplifying not even just the SKUs, but the sheer amount of stuff. Cisco's a very big company. We have a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes to our detriment. And the reason there is that if you're that big, you have to do whatever you have to do to help as many customers as you can. So there you might appeal to all these customers. You might have all these features and only a subset use them. Or it might be you have all these features that have to be available in every single platform because that's what everybody's asking for. And from a customer's perspective, you notice that, like, for example, I joked around about, I don't really joke, but the UADP ASIC and being able to have value add and protect your investment. Mpls wasn't even a thing on a 3850. I remember when 3850s came out, and the biggest question everybody said is, where's my Mpls? Where's my Mpls? And because of this chip, they just dropped a software download that would instantiate, reprogram the chip, and instantiate Mpls. And there you go. Now you have Mpls. So I think the fact that now everything's iOS XE, everything's programmable, everything uses API, everything uses APIs. It's a simpler message, and I think that it gives customers the ability to say, I can use this device for more than just one thing. It's not, this is my router, this is my switch, this is my architecture, this is what makes my business run. And it could be Wi-Fi, your Wi-Fi 6, we have our wireless LAN, we have all these different capabilities, but it all kind of plays together as a functioning system versus disparate devices now.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it definitely threw me for a loop when I first became aware of, like, when they annihilated the AirNet line and, like, here's the Catalyst Wi-Fi device. I'm like, wait, what? Catalyst is a switch.
And they're different. They're different, obviously but they're different for a reason. I think, it threw me back a little bit too, because I mean, I'm internal, and you hear these things, you're like, well, the first thing you think of, I put my customer hat, and I'm like, what? Why are you doing that? But when you dig into the background on some of these things, it's really for the customers, is to make it simpler and easier and less confusing. And it's also good for Cisco to be able to say we're going forward in this direction. This is our charter. This is our direction. This is what we're going to do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for clearing that up. It does help, honestly. Now, quick question from Hamed. He's got a question about network programmability I'll just read the question. He says, hey, Jason, we know that the network programmability may compromise the network stability. Being unaware of consequences, what is your advice to the network developers to avoid that? So I'm guessing, like, introducing code into the network may introduce instability.
Sure. Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things that I talk with folks about is there's a couple things to do there. And the reason a lot of times putting code on a network, whether it's pasting on a config in a router or switch, can cause issues, because if for some reason you didn't shut that interface before you put that configuration on, or you forgot to do a reload in and you changed something and you're locked out of the device now and you have to have somebody physically reboot it, or any of these things, typical network engineering problems can really rear their head. From a programmability perspective, there's some pieces, and I say this, and I've probably been quoted saying this 1,000 times, but you can automate failure just as fast as you can automate success. And what I mean by that is if I go through there and I put in a batch of code that just says, you know, shut all these interfaces, change the password, and reload in, I could seriously brick that device and lock myself out of it real easily. But you can also do it to a mass scale of thousands of devices as well. So really, there are things that you have to understand, and learning part of programmability and automation gives you the understanding of, hey, you know what? It's just another method to log into that device, whether it's command line, whether it's a console cable, whether you're webbing into it, you're using an API, you still are accessing these devices. And if you have the rights or the administrative control, you can break it just as fast as you fixed it. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think obviously learning in a test lab, knowing there's things like continuous innovation and continuous development, when you're talking about CI/CD, testing things out and building workflows and streams to see what it will do in a production environment or a test lab environment before it actually gets committed, understanding what the consequences are if I did push this. So sometimes having that test bed or that lab to be able to do things in is very, very key.
That's a great question. That's a great thing. I'm glad you brought up, because something I've been looking more into is Git and CI/CD and keeping your code and that pipeline. With network engineers now, we're converting our configurations to code in a way. What does that look like for network engineers now? Like, what does it look like to use Git? What does it look like to start programming or designing our network with this kind of methodology?
You know, it's kind of interesting. Like from a network engineering perspective, we've always had to go through what we call change request or change control. You always have, for the most part. I mean, a majority of network engineers, if you're working on a network, you probably have to put in some sort of ticket or something saying that you're going to change something in and what the expected and desired outcome would be. Like, okay, it's going to reboot that site because I'm upgrading the code, or I'm just going to push this change. It shouldn't impact anything whatsoever. And then be prepared for when it completely crashes and reboots with absolutely no config on it, and you have to start all over again from scratch, right? There's been a control aspect of that we've had forever from a network engineering perspective. And I think that follows or builds onto that when you're talking about pipelines and things of that nature, because it is a control mechanism to be able to see if there's going to be a change, if there's a revision to the code, what the outcome could be on the actual network or device itself. So you have that ability to do similar. So we're just putting it first, because you kind of have to have that change control pipeline and all of that built out first before you commit the code, because you might blow something up, or you want to see what's essentially going to happen in your environment first. And all of that can be done in a test lab and prior to even pushing anything in production. But I think the method of thinking is that it's now backwards from what we used to do. So now, instead of putting in, you know, I guess it actually wouldn't even be backwards. It would be the same, right? Instead of putting in a change control and then waiting till it approved and then doing it, you can now go through and put in the configuration, the code, see how it's going to impact the environment before ever even committing it to production. So in a way, you're kind of doing that same thing, but it's more structured with software development.
Okay. So how far, I mean, I know we can do it with some things like with SD Access, all these programmability things we have in store, being able to test our code on the network to see how a network change might look and then deploy it. How would you do that on like a traditional network that might just have routers and switches and firewalls that maybe aren't controlled by a centralized controller?
Sure.
Is there a way right now?
And there is. And we've all, I'm sure some of the folks listening have heard of macros or being able to do scripting on devices, or Tickle, or some of these other things that you can do on a network device, where you can essentially, you can have a config and then have a rollback. There's a rollback configurations that you can have set up that if for some reason something doesn't work, it can roll back. Or I jokingly mentioned reload in. There's a command that you say reload in and an amount of time. So it might be reload in 5 minutes. You make all your changes, and all of a sudden you hit that. We've all done it. We've all had that pucker factor where we hit the enter key and nothing's coming back. Oh no. So if you did a reload in, and hopefully you didn't hit write mem.
Yeah.
If you did a reload in, it would reboot to the configuration that was on there before. Now, obviously, we want to make sure we do proper hygiene as far as backing up the configs before we make any changes and things of that nature. And if you did hit write mem, hopefully on the TFTP server, you had the configuration from before you hit write mem, so you can roll it back to the previous version. But
you're
and
giving
I've
me
been
PTSD
in both of those
here, man.
I laugh because I've been there.
Yep.
But at that point, I think that would help from a structure perspective, is that you really would be able to test out and understand how that impacts your environment before even making that change.
Cool. Yeah, and that's interesting. Like, it's so funny because in a way, if you ran your network like you should, we've had this mentality for a while, just in kind of a backwards way, but we're finally adopting, I guess, proper procedures that software developers have been using for a long time, and
Right.
it's more streamlined. It's better. It really is better.
And we didn't know it back then either, though. If we would have known it, we probably would have been a little bit more proficient at the development cadence and how to do some of these different technologies.
Right, exactly. Now we're just over the hour mark here, so I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to hear, Mr. Gooley, what has got you excited right now? What do you? I mean, you finished 3 books this year. What's on the horizon for you? What technology are you just super excited about?
Obviously, I need to figure out how to do some Raspberry Pi stuff, so we'll talk about that.
Yes.
And I think what really has me excited is, I'm going to be, hopefully, I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but
Whew.
I have put in to possibly do some videos for Ian Core. So we'll see, but it's going to be more obscure.
Is
So
that
it's
the
not going to
proper
be
way to say it? EN Core?
EN Core, Enterprise Networking Core. I don't know, EN Core, Encore, it's the same thing.
I mean, I'll adopt to the proper phraseology. I just don't know how to say it.
I've heard all of them, Encore, EN Core, Enterprise Networking Core, but they're going to be a little bit more obscure videos. So, what are some of the things that you would let me flip it around? Let me ask you a question on your own show.
Oh,
What do you think are some of the technologies on the EN Core that you think folks would struggle with, that they would need to learn?
Let's see. So coming from CCNA, going to Encore, EN Core, Encore, however you want to say it, I would say probably maybe EAGRP a little bit, going more advanced into BGP, and then the new automation concepts that weren't covered in the NA. Because I know it goes heavier in the SD access. You don't have to know hands-on, but it does go heavier into SD access. Those are some of the things I would look at. And I think wireless would probably be a big hurdle too.
So some of the videos that I'm thinking about working on are the more obscure ones, such as the programmability, automation, looking at things like some of the different tools that are out there, some wireless, but also looking at things like exam techniques, things to learn, software-defined access 100%, software-defined WAN 100%, because these are all things that, for the most part, frankly, a year or so ago, I wouldn't say they didn't exist, but they didn't exist on the exam.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that some of the videos would be for some of the more obscure stuff like that. And I wouldn't say obscure, but some of the newer, dare I say new. It's newer stuff that sometimes you might not have a lot of experience with. And where do you find a DNA center? And how do you go about studying these different things? And how can I spin up a vManage? And so all of that is kind of what I'm excited about. I'm hopefully going to be doing some of those pretty soon. The other thing I would say from a technology perspective is that I want to do more with some of the automation pieces around things outside of just networking.
Ooh.
So, yeah. So, like, obviously, there will still be networks involved, but just random things. My brother is a big woodworker. He does a lot of woodworking, and he builds all kinds of unique things. Bottle stoppers to pens to whatever it might be. But I'm thinking about doing different things like building, radios or different things that are made out of wood, but still are technology you can still use for programmability. So being able to do different things with your home automation and lighting. And I have a buddy of mine that I went to his house, and the guy works for a company called Onico. And Onico used to be Pioneer. So it's Pioneer Onico. And I go to this guy's house, and he said, turn on the cloud. And I'm like, okay, what's this?
Turn on the cloud.
Above his head, so you see you have the foam, the noise canceling foam that you have back there on the wall. He has all this stuff that looks like big stalactites all over his ceiling, right? And he says, turn on the cloud, and there are lights, automation and lights, and it looks like it's thundering and raining up behind it. And
oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It's just useless, but super cool, right? You can automate it.
No. If my wife would let me, that'd be the first thing I do. Have you ever been to the Rainforest Cafe?
Oh yeah, totally.
When
I
they
would
have
live
like the thunderstorm thing going on every hour, I'm like,
there. It's
honey,
awesome.
I want this in the house. Like, I love this. Can I do this? Will you let me? It's a hard no every time. I'm gonna keep asking her. But yeah, that idea is amazing. Please
Different,
do that.
different stuff. Like I put a pond in the backyard. I say pond, and I mean it's like 4 foot circle, dude. So it's like itty bitty. It's like a little waterfall thing, just so I can have a place to go zen and chill out, you know. And but to that effect, the sound effects and having like automation with music to having meditation music and stuff play automatically and things of that nature. And I just think some of that stuff would be really cool. And obviously, I'm a big music nut.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. You didn't get a chance to plug your Metal DevOps. How's that going, by the way?
I think it's going really well. What I think is really cool about it is that I'm starting to see a lot of different folks from all walks of life finally come together for things that we have in common, and that's music and technology. And I've got an interview actually coming up in a few days about a gentleman who created a horror movie. He's a director of a horror movie. I mean, how cool is that? It's not necessarily metal, but it uses a lot of technology. And I think what's neat is that when I first launched Metal DevOps, it was going to be a mixture of metal music and DevOps and technology and programmability. And it just went out of control into the music side, which I thought was so cool. And it's a really positive thing. But I'm going to start actually pulling in some more different diverse guests to be able to talk about different things like building movies and
Interesting.
writing scripts and comic books and just random, because in my mind it's still technology related. There are things like I'm working on, and I'm trying through my Shure contact there, sure,
Sure.
to try to talk to different artists because they use the Shure wireless for all of their gear, their in-ear monitors, their stage, their guitar, their microphones, everything's wireless. And it uses the same type of technology that we use, Wi-Fi 6, different technologies like that. I would love to be able to have a conversation about how wireless is pervasive in a music environment.
Oh yeah, my
that would be
brother-in-law, up until this year, he was a sound guy. He travels with bands. He's an audio engineer, and I was amazed to hear how much networking is involved with just stage design and concerts and all that. It's amazing. It's a whole different industry almost.
It is. And you know what's fascinating, and I can't show you because it's actually on the back of my laptop, but Live Nation and Cisco partnered together. And we do a lot of stuff for, Justin Timberlake and like I'm drawing a blank on the other band, Imagine Dragons and all these big bands, that we do stuff, but it's all technology related too. And they have pretty stout networks when they come and they perform, and they have a lot of Cisco equipment in there. And I thought it was just the coolest thing. It was the marriage of Live Nation and Cisco, and then there was a sticker that came out of it. There was a Cisco logo with the little emoji of the horns, and to me that was perfect. So that is the base of my whole laptop, is just the little Cisco logo with the horns. But it's just different, interesting aspects of life, and I think things that could be beneficial and useful to folks. Getting my daughter into IT, much about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to get her spun up on things she loves to do, but find a unique way of doing it.
Oh yeah.
And it's available for everybody. And I think that's the other message that I wanted to push across, is that I do a lot of stuff for giving back, and I do a lot of philanthropy work. And, between Cisco helping out with things, doing sleep outs for Covenant House and the homelessness, to just giving back and trying to do volunteering of my time to help organizations with whatever it might be, either thought leadership or helping them with their network, or even going to my wife's preschool, because my wife is a preschool teacher, and volunteering my time
bless
to
her
spend,
heart.
However many hours to do whatever it is, fix something in Excel, put an access point in, whatever it may be. It's cool, and I love to see more of that in the giving back aspect of what I can do with Metal DevOps. So we'll see.
Awesome.
Hopefully more will come out of that, though.
So where can people find you?
Aha. So at Jason_Gooley on all social media platforms, and then at Metal DevOps on all social media platforms. And then obviously the YouTube channel is Metal DevOps. I am starting something new, and I briefly just did a contest a couple weeks ago about giving away some books, as you knew, and I appreciate the retweeting of that.
Of course.
I'm going to do that again. We were going to do it by Thanksgiving, but what we decided to do was a couple things, and I've now partnered up with a slew of different Cisco Press authors. So it's not going to be just Jason Gooley giving away books. It's going to be a whole metric ton of stuff coming in from Cisco Press, different authors, different folks, maybe even like yourself, if I can wink, wink, get get you in on some of that action.
We'll see. We'll
To
see.
just
Yeah,
give
we'll
away
talk.
stuff and help, especially in this gruesome time of need, right? I mean,
Hmm.
everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's sitting at home. They want something to do. They want to learn. They want to challenge themselves. This is the best time to be doing these different giveaways and giving back.
Amen.
Um, and so that's coming really big. And the other thing is that, you know, when we're talking about videos, I wanted to start doing something for the more non-metalhead folks, because I know there are a little bit of both. And so I created a channel called the Network Developer, and it was one of those things that it
Mm.
kind of just came to me, and I haven't done anything yet. I used that as part of the contest to try to gain more visibility on it, but the thought process there is just for how do you be a network engineer? How do you be a network developer? What does it even mean? And just having conversations, talks, guests, videos, different things like that, focusing strategically on the network development process, programmability, automation, things of that nature. Not just metal. I am a diehard metal fan, and I would love to do it all on there. But I think I might lose some of the audience on both of those, right? If I focus just on metal DevOps and did more metal and technology, I might lose some of the hardcore programmatic folks. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna
you might want
see
to
if I
like
can
go
do
like
something.
K-pop DevOps, or I don't
K-pop
know.
DevOps,
Yeah.
BTS for life. No, I'm just kidding. uh, um,
No, that's cool
Not
though.
that
It's
there's
it's so
anything
cool.
wrong with BTS.
No, no, beats. I mean, they're always on the
Yeah,
trending page on YouTube. They're doing something right.
always. They're doing
Yeah.
something better than I am, I tell you what.
Same here, man. If I can just, I don't know. We'll see. Uh, so, you're doing metal DevOps. You got all this cool stuff you're doing, philanthropy. You're giving away stuff. It's awesome. Where was I going to go with this? So we talked about what you're excited about next, getting into automation, doing all these cool things. Any new books on the horizon?
uh,
Oh, you can't say it, can you?
I'm pretty sure. No, I'm going to say probably not. And the reason being, at
Hmm.
least not for the foreseeable future. And the reason being is um, I did neglect a lot of the time that I wanted to spend with my wife and kids doing some of that. And it does take a toll on you. I mean, if you spend all that time behind a computer, at some point you have to like, there's something else on the horizon outside of the computer. So
And it's easy to
I'm
have
probably not.
yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like you'll get so heads down on what you're doing, and you honestly enjoy it, right? I mean, you
You
wouldn't be
love
doing
it.
it
It's
otherwise.
passion. You love it.
And it's
Yeah.
easy to forget what's around you. Yeah, I'm right there
Yeah.
with you.
So I think I'm going to focus on videos for a while. And I think from a couple different angles. Obviously, the Ian Core stuff, I'm going to hopefully get that going. And then I'm looking at doing some of the more, like I said, network developer stuff, just career advice, programmability, just a straight talk kind of thing. And just be me. And that's about all I can do. And kind of just try to not overdo it too much. I think that's another thing that isn't talked about so much is that burnout is legitimately real.
Oh yeah.
I was very close. I'm not gonna lie, and anybody out there who knows me knows I'm pretty honest about these things. And I was so burnt, I just didn't even want to do anything. I mean, you're sitting there, you're looking up. Oh, I got to get up. I have to write 4 books. That was supposed to be a year and a half, and all of a sudden it's now 4 books in 3 months. And next thing you know, you're just gunning, go nonstop. Um, but I learned from that. I learned, we have to prioritize certain things, and I love giving back. I love helping folks. But you have to prioritize what is important, and dare I say, secure your own oxygen mask before you secure the person's next to you.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you're totally right. I mean, I think about that all the time. Because I fall in the same trap. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
always trying to put new stuff out on the channel here, and it's easy to overload yourself and don't take care of yourself. So yeah, that's a good message to get out. I can't wait to see more of your stuff. I will put every link you provide me in the description, guys. If you want to follow Jason Gooley, which if you want, it's not a want, you should just go do it. Go follow wherever he is. Now, as you got 2 CCIEs. You've been doing the Cisco stuff for a minute. You know how to kind of run things. For people just starting out and they're starting their studying journey and they're trying to get motivated, try to just kind of what we're talking about now. Like this year's been weird. It's a weird time of year. People are stuck at home. They don't have much to do, but they're maybe looking to change their careers. So many career changes this year because of the situation.
Yeah.
What's
Totally.
your best advice right now for studying and getting in the grind?
My best advice would be to take the time for you. And what I mean by that is that It might not necessarily mean be cracking open a book right away. It might be that piano course that you wanted to do, or you wanted to learn some sort of something. Do whatever you need to do for yourself first, but then also invest in yourself just like you would in a bank, right? Invest in yourself from a knowledge perspective. Definitely take the time to study. Now is a really good opportunity because there are so many deals out there. There are so many books that are available. We keep doing the book giveaways and things like that to encourage that type of thing. But also make sure you give enough time to yourself while you're studying, because that is the biggest advice I could offer. Is it's so easy to get down there and sit down with these books and you start cracking open these books that are this thick, and next thing you know, you've been down here for weeks and you have this huge beard. And no, I'm kidding.
And that's how you do it. People ask me, how do you get that beard? Get this book over here.
It's the biggest big book.
The Encore book by Jason Gooley. That's how you get one.
See, I'm trying to get my beard out, but I just got to keep it low. It's just one of those things for me. But yeah, I would say now's a great time to study. Now's a great time to go for DevNet. Now's a great time to go for any certification for that matter. And even if it's not certification, like I'm gonna show you a book. Hopefully, it doesn't offend anybody.
Oh, no worries here.
It is edited, but I picked this book up.
A book about hope. I love that.
And if you haven't read the book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving It,
yep, seen
that's
that,
another book to take a look at. And I think when I say invest in yourself, invest in time to do something that interests you, that motivates you. And the one last thing that I will leave you with. This was actually from a training that we did at work. There's an XY axis, if anybody can see it. And here's what it says. Something you're good at versus something that energizes you. So on this side, it says, am I good at it? No or yes. And if it says, I'm good at it, yes, but it does not energize me, it says it weakens me. And it's a weakness. Minimize your time here. And then it says, if I'm not good at it and it doesn't energize me, it's a derailer. Right? And then over here, for development opportunities, something that energizes me that I'm not very good at. So in here I have like piano, woodworking, improving on the drums, things like that. And then strength, something to do more, spend time with family, play the guitar, do karate, metal DevOps, right? Whatever it may be, this, as simple as it seemed, was so important to me to actually build out, because I can literally sit back and look at this and be like, why am I doing that? Like, for example, I'm really good at writing books. I enjoy it. However, it does not energize me. And it energizes me at the end when it's done. And I could say, look, I actually did this. We helped out. But spending all that time at Starbucks till 10 o'clock at night on a wooden chair trying to write a book, it's not probably the most healthy.
No, because guys in beards will hack you there too. I mean, it's a very dangerous place, Starbucks.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. Like all of a sudden, I'm like, what's that noise? And then it's my computer on fire because Chuck hacked me. But I mean, that's kind of the whole point, right? Is I think my theme for now is essentially do what makes you happy and energize yourself, and feel good about it. And then you have enough energy and strength to do any of the other things. Like studying will come anyway, because if that's something you're passionate about, but you have to give yourself enough time and energy to be relaxed enough to adopt it. Because otherwise you'll just be sitting at that book like, oh, I don't, and it becomes a chore. When the second studying becomes a chore, it's no fun anymore. There's no fun anymore.
So what's your advice? Because obviously there's parts of studying, like in the CCNA, there's maybe parts that are not so interesting, like learning the theory behind something. I mean, it's always fun to lab up OSPF, lab up spanning tree, or whatever, as long as it's still here. But then you have to get to the points where you have to learn theory, you have to learn how to do like cable stuff, like all the different cabling things. What do you do when you get to that? How do you just stick with it?
So some of the things I try to gamify things. If it's something that's not interesting to me, I try to gamify it in a way that I can try to make it stick, where it's fun to learn. So like if making cables, like I can only say orange, white, orange, green, blue, white, green, brown so many times. It's like I've been making cables since I was probably 10 years old. You know what I mean? My dad was in the military, but he was also a phone guy, and then there was Cat 5, and I was doing 2-pair. I was all kinds of fun stuff, right? But make it fun. So maybe do it with a family member. Get together with your friends. Like, for example, there's a really good friend of mine now who believe it or not, he's decided that he's going into IT.
All
And
right.
he's had a passion for it. He went to high school for it, absolutely loved it, and ended up becoming an over-the-road trucker for the longest time. And now he's like, I want to do this, and he's using some of CBT Nugget stuff as well. And he hit me up one day and he's like, dude, I want to learn A plus and I want to go get my A plus and I want to go through and figure out what I can do to get into IT. So I'm like, all right, well, come over Saturday at 1 p.m. And he's like, okay. So he comes over Saturday at 1 p.m. Little did he know, I've taken over a lot of go to market for wireless for Cisco for EN now, and I had to build a wireless lab, 2 brand new 9800 series controllers and 6 9120s and all this
Ooh.
stuff. And he's sitting there and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, we're going to build a wireless lab. And but he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? And the whole purpose of it was to make it fun and interesting for him. So he had to learn cabling. I helped him make a cable. And then he was making his own cables. I'm like, all right, well, I need a cable and I need it to be straight through. What color code would that be? And I'm pop quizzing him and stuff like that. And he's like, okay. And well, I remember from the CBT, it has this and that. And next thing you know, we're in there troubleshooting wireless issues. And he's like, well, what about this, this, and this? And I'm like,
Man.
wait a minute, man, get out of here, man. Like, wait a minute. How did you know that?
He doesn't know how lucky he is. My gosh, that's amazing. Oh,
It's crazy. And he's been a friend of mine for dang near my whole life. And it's just one of those things where, you know, if you have the ability and the method to help somebody along, to make their life different and better, even in the smallest of ways, is there really an excuse not to do it? I mean, it's tough, man. I mean, I get burnout going back to that, but if it's something that will benefit that person for hopefully the rest of their lives, I'm all in it, man. And that's why you see me out there all the time asking people how they're going on their certification journey, what do they plan on doing next. And I might not even know who you are, but it's interesting to me to figure out what you want to do next. And if there's anything I can do in the meantime to help, shoot me a message and I'll do whatever I can.
and that's great advice. I mean, all you guys watching right now, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been doing IT for like 5-6 years, whatever, 20 years, 30 years, you've got something to offer for people. People right now are trying to get into IT. They're trying to stay motivated. They're maybe going through a hard time. Get involved in the community. You do have something to offer. And like Jason said, like it's not a whole lot just to offer a little bit of help, a little bit of advice. Every one of you have something to lend to somebody, something to give back to someone. So jump into a community, join something, join my Discord server, jump on Twitter, whatever. You can help out in a million ways and just do one thing a day. I don't know. It's something simple. Yeah, that's great advice.
I mean, one thing I do say is that I had replied to all of my LinkedIn messages, and except the ones that say, hey, do you want PNP? Do you want...
Well,
I don't. Block, but
well, you guys heard that. Jason, he'll reply to every LinkedIn message, so go message him right now.
Message me. I will reply. It might take a little while, but I will reply. And as long as it's not something obtuse, like I've had a couple in the last couple of weeks that were getting me a job. And then another one was give me a scholarship. And I'm like, how am I supposed to give you a scholarship?
Yeah.
You're going to have to apply for a job, and then maybe then the college or something will give you a scholarship. But if it's something I can actually help with, for sure. And please don't come to me asking for dumps. Heaven forbid you do that.
And for those of you who have no idea what that is, and the connotation of that word might be kind of weird, exam dumps. It's a way to cheat on exams. That's a big no-no. Don't you go Googling that. Don't even think about it. It's cheating yourself. That's stupid. Anyways, thanks, Jason, for coming on. My wife's texted me saying, hey, it's time to end the stream. You've been up here too long.
I heard him up there
and dinner
well.
and dinner's ready. So, dude, thank you so much for coming on. Again, guys, if you want to follow Jason anywhere, I've got the links below. If you want to check out his books, which, I mean, he writes the books for Encore, SD Access, Sd-Wan, Devnet Associate. He's the guy, along with a few other people, but in my mind, he's the guy. So anyways, Jason, we'll definitely have to have you back on, and I can't wait to see what you do with the developer, or the network developer, and then, of course, Metal DevOps and all the cool stuff you're working on. Yeah, I think we covered it all. Thanks for coming on, man.
Dude,
I appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me. Thank you all out there, and we'll see you all soon.
Absolutely. Catch you guys next time.
See you. Bye.